Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Sir Abdullah YUSUFI and today I'll be going over O-Level Economics Paper 1 MCQ paper. This is the paper from October-November 2021 and this is variant 12. Now just going over the details, as you all know that you have around 45 minutes to attempt these MCQs. There are total 30 MCQs in this question paper and you need to do all the questions. Now quickly starting off with the question 1. Question 1 is saying to help reduce the price of oil, new suppliers are needed. However, objectors oppose exploration of new sites because of the environmental damage it may cause. Why is this statement an example of the basic economic problem? So, definitely we all know that oil is a limited resource, and part B is saying oil is expensive, the exploration involves demand and supply, there are external costs involved in production. The answer should be A because oil is a limited resource. This is referring to the concept of scarcity. Moving on to question number 2. What is an opportunity cost of for a consumer is spending money on a holiday? So part A is saying the potential interest earned if the holiday money had been saved, the price paid for an air ticket to the holiday destination. This can't be because obviously this is what you're paying. The rubbish created during the holiday which affects the local community, this is more like the external cost. And D is the satisfaction that the consumer gains from the holiday. This is related to the utility that one is getting. So the question is asking for the opportunity cost, so the answer will be A, the potential interest that is earned if the holiday money had been saved, because opportunity cost is the cost of next best alternative foregone. So if one is spending their money on a holiday, that means they could have earned some interest on it if they had invested it in a bank saving account and instead of going on the holiday. So the opportunity cost over here will be A. Moving on to question number 3. Helium is a gas that is limited in supply because it takes thousands of years to form. So yes, this is a natural resource. The US government holds 35% of the world's supply of helium and has been selling its stocks. Helium is essential in medical scanners. It is also used for party balloons, which is a wasteful alternative use of the valuable good. Which two concepts apply to this statement? Okay, so the economic concepts that can apply to this statement, part A is saying demand and supply, government subsidy. Well, we can say that demand and supply is mentioned over here because like we're talking about that helium is an essential medical scanner and this is a natural resource, but there is no mention, we cannot connect it in any way to a government subsidy because there is no mention of that. There is nothing mentioned about government subsidy over here. Part B is saying excess demand and resource allocation. Again, there is no sign of excess demand over here. We cannot judge by the statement whether there is an excess demand or resource allocation is how you're using. So yeah, this can apply, but not both of them are applying over here. So excess demand cannot be uh, judged through the statement that is given. Part C is saying opportunity cost and private monopoly. Again, no mention of monopoly. Opportunity cost definitely exists. You can use it for the medical purposes or you can use it for filling up balloons. Part D is saying public sector and factors of production. Well, yes, now this is the only option that is left, and again over here we can see that public sector mention is given as they have mentioned that government holds 35% of the supply, so public sector concept is being applicable. And yes, this is a factor of production because this is a natural resource, this is used in for various purposes. So yes, we'll go with option D. Moving on to question number 4. Which combination of characteristics describe a public good? Now, a public good is a good that is non-excludable. So, very first thing, there are two options that are given non-excludable. So, non-excludable means that you cannot stop anyone from using that good, and it is non-rival in consumption, as in it will not be reduced for others when it is being used by someone else. So the combination of characteristics that describe a public good is that it is non-excludable and non-rival in consumption. Question number 5: what is an advantage of a market economy? So market economy is where we are judging market prices through demand and supply, the market forces. Part A is saying equilibrium market price clears the market. The clearing the market means that the equilibrium market price is being determined by the market forces. Part B, producers and consumers have the same aims. No, the government has no need to intervene in market. The lowest price possible is always charged. The answer is A, because this is what market economy is all about, meaning that your market forces are determining the market price. So your demand and supply interaction will be telling you the equilibrium price, and that is considered as the market price. So the price that you are charging is the one where your demand and supply meets and it is equal. Moving on to question number 6: what is the macroeconomic aim of a government? Number A, balance of payment stability. Well, this can be an economic aim for a government. Deflation, not necessarily, not always, because if the country wants to have economic growth, then inflation will be present. So deflation is not a main aim of a government. Income inequality is definitely not an aim for any government, because they would not want their population to have a huge gap between the rich and poor. And again, unemployment is not aim of any government, so we go with option A, that is balance of payment stability, meaning that your imports and exports should be of almost the same amount, so that you're not experiencing a deficit, and preferably you want to have an uh, surplus. Question number 7: the economy relies on potash to make fertilizer. A new deposit of potash is discovered. So like this is a natural resource to use for making fertilizer. A new deposit of potash is discovered. Which diagram shows the change in market for potash? Now when you're getting a new deposit, that means that the supply will be increasing and supply will be moving outwards. Now there's only one diagram that is showing supply going outwards, and this is shown by S1 being the original and S2 by being the new one. So we can see that supply curve has shifted outwards, because this new deposit of this natural resource being discovered will increase the supply of that particular ingredient or that particular raw material. Always when you have two different diagram or supply curves, please look carefully at the small number that is written along with the curve to indicate whether which one is the new and which one is the old. So S1 is indicating the original supply and S2 is indicating the new supply. So we can clearly see that supply has shifted outwards. So option is D. Moving on to question number 8. The table shows the quantity demanded at different prices. For which fall in price is the demand price inelastic? Okay, so they're asking you to see that which fall in price will be showing that demand is price inelastic. As we know that price inelasticity is shown by a value where your PD is less than 1. So when PD value is less than 1, that will indicate inelastic demand. Now whenever you have one of these questions where they have given you different prices and quantity, and they're asking you to calculate which one is price inelastic or which one is price elastic, it's good to look at these figures and take the difference of the highermost or the lowermost values. Okay, so first of all, we'll look at the different prices that have been given to us, and there's different quantity demanded over here. Now, as we can see that as the price is being reduced, the quantity demand is increasing. It's increasing by 1 unit over here, by 1 unit over here, and again this over here from 5 to 7 it is increasing by 2 units, and 7 to 9 it's increasing by 2 units. Now, I always advise my students that when you are calculating these values for price inelastic or price elasticity, and we have given a table like this has appeared in many MCQs before. So what you can do is you take the topmost values and you see the difference of these two, because for PED calculation we need percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price, right? So we can take the difference from the percentage change in quantity demanded and percentage change in price, and you can do that by using the bottom two values. So if we take the difference of the topmost value, we see that price is being reduced by $1 and the quantity demand is being increased by $1. So the percentage change in price over here will be simple 1 over 6. So 1 over 6 gives us a value of, let's suppose, that is approximately 16%. And so suppose if this is 16%, and 1 over 3 gives us an approximate value of 33.33%. so the percentage change in quantity demand is, let's say, 33%, and if we divide it by 16%, so to calculate elasticity of demand, if we divide percentage change in quantity demand, that is around 33%, by 16%, we'll get a value that will be somewhere around, let's suppose this will be somewhere around 2 point something, maybe 2.4 or some, but whatever it is, this is 2 and 2 is obviously greater than 1. So this is actually showing that demand is elastic over here. So this cannot be the case. If we look at the values, the bottom values, so again the price is being reduced by $1 and the quantity demand is being increased by 2 units. Now if we take the percentage change over here, so 1 over 3 will give us the percentage of around, again, that 33.33%. so I'm just taking it as an approximate 33, and this will become 2 over 7. So 2 over 7 will be 0.28, that is almost 28%. So this will be around 28%. I am just taking approximate values because all we need to see is whether we'll be getting a value that is greater than 1. So the percentage change in price, the percentage change in quantity demand is 28 divided by 33, and when we do this we will get a value that is obviously less than 1. So when we divide 28 by 33, approximately we get a value of 0.84. so the 0.84 is definitely less than 1, and this shows that this is price inelastic, the demand is price inelastic. So we can safely choose option D. You can also try it on the other values. Obviously this is one of those time consuming questions, and you can also check for 4 to 3, but for 4 to 3 again you will get a value that will be greater than 1. So we choose option D, that is the price change from 3 to 2. So I'll just go over this again. We have to see whether the demand is price inelastic. So we know that price is inelastic where PED value is less than 1. So we did a simple calculation to see if the value is less than 1 at the top two figures. We took the percentage change in price and we took the percentage change in quantity demanded, and the value that we were getting was 2.4. So 2.4 is greater than 1, so we are rejecting this part. This would have been the correct answer if they were asking for price in elastic. And when we did the same calculation for the bottom two values, we see that we are getting the PED value as 0.84. So this is the value that is less than 1, and therefore we are choosing option D. Government policy will increase productivity. So which government policy can increase productivity? This is supply side policies. Decreasing the number of training programs, no, this will be having a negative impact. Encouraging labor intensive production, this does not necessarily guarantee that it will increase productivity, because that means you're not encouraging capital intensive production. Productivity includes both capital and labor intensive. So promoting in good industrial relations, well, yes, this can be applicable. Reducing private sector investment, no, not necessarily, because that will always, that does not really guarantee that there will be an increase in productivity. So we go with option C, that is to promote good industrial relations. When there are good industrial relations, that will enable businesses to be more efficient and be more productive, as they will be able to make their operations more efficient. Moving on to question number 10. The diagram shows the wage rate of cleaners and nurses. Okay, so OWC is the original wage rate of cleaners, and OWN is the original wage rate for the nurses. So O is this point. The question is asking what is the result of a national minimum wage of CM. A national minimum wage of OM is introduced. Now, as we know, national minimum wage is most of the time the wage that is above the market equilibrium wage, and a government imposes this wage where it feels that the market equilibrium wage is too low. So in the case of so the question is asking wage or rate of cleaners, wage rate of nurses, and it is asking you to show whether there will be a fall or a rise. So initially we see for cleaners that this was the market wage rate, and if the uh, government imposes a national minimum wage, so obviously this is higher than the equilibrium wage, and now the wage rate of cleaners will be affected. Why? Because the demand for the demand for cleaners will fall at this wage rate, right? So when the demand for cleaners will fall, there will be an excess supply due to this national minimum wage, and because of this excess supply, this will leave many cleaners unemployed, who will be ready to work at even lower wages because they just don't have a job. So the effect of this national minimum wage in this condition will be that the wage rate of cleaners will actually fall, right? So the wage rate for the existing cleaners who have a job, that will fall, and we can see that there is only one option with wage rate of cleaners falling. And if you look at the other side, where the job market for nurses, the equilibrium wage is higher than the national minimum wage, and this will stay the same because their national minimum wage is, suppose at this point now, OM, so still there will be paid more because their original market wage rate is higher, so this will increase. Now again, if I just can go over the concept of national minimum wage, whenever we are introducing a national minimum wage, The concept of national minimum wage is that it is always higher than the equilibrium wage rate in the market, and the government is imposing the national minimum wage because it feels that the equilibrium rate is low. However, what happens is that when the government has imposed this wage, so suppose the market wage rate was, let's say, $5, and now the government says that the companies must pay $7 to the workers. So national minimum wage rate has increased. But what do we observe looking at the market forces, the demand and supply? We see that now the demand has reduced, as in the companies would demand less cleaners at the wage rate of 7, and more cleaners will be willing to work. Now, due to this factor, there will be excess supply of workers in the market. So, like, there will be excess workers in the market, leading to them being unemployed. And as we all know, whenever unemployment is high, the wages will, the market wages will fall, because that way companies can exploit people, because they will find more people who are ready to work at a lower wage because there's unemployment. So the wage rate of cleaners will fall as a result of national minimum wage, and wage rate of nurses will increase. Moving on to question number 11. Which result of increased specialization in a firm is an advantage to the firm but a disadvantage for some of the workers? Okay, so something that is favorable for the company but unfavorable for the workers. Option A, greater mechanization. Well, yes, this can be a possibility, because like if you're introducing more machinery into the business, that will be advantageous for the firm, as it may be able to achieve technological economies of scale. However, this may lead workers to become redundant. Part B is saying higher labor productivity. No, this is not a disadvantage. Higher skills level, again not a disadvantage, and longer training times will not be a disadvantage for the business, because so we choose option C, that is greater mechanization. Moving on to question number 12, the diagram shows the imposition of a subsidy on a product supplied by a firm. Which area represents the total revenue of the firm including subsidy? So the diagram is asking you to show the area that shows the total revenue of the firm including the subsidy. Okay, now first let's look at this diagram and see what's the effect of the subsidy. We can see that S1 is being moved to S2. That means the supply has increased as a result of subsidy. The original equilibrium point was at J, and now this has moved to K. So we can see that this increase is as a result of the government subsidy. Now the question is only referring to the total revenue. So total revenue is the total area that is covered between the from point O to the new quantity level. So suppose O to M, and the part where they are cutting on their original H or original supply, which was at the price G. So we can say that OGHM is the total revenue for the firm, OGHM. While the case over here, because remember this was the S1, so S1 was the initial supply level of the firm. They were supplying at this level, and after the subsidy, let's say their cost of production reduced, and as a result their supply increased. Now the new quantity that they're producing and selling is quantity M. So the distance from OM and OGH, so when we look at the old supply curve at M, at the quantity M. This was at this point G. So the question was asking for the total revenue. So that means total revenue is the whole area that supposedly this square shape figure is gonna make. So that is your total area, right? So answer will be OGHM. We always take the total amount at the new supply curve and match it with your old supply curve to see what they were in actual position they were willing to sell earlier. Moving on to question number 13, the diagram shows the total cost curve for a firm. What can be concluded about the firm? It has no fixed cost. No, because this is starting from this point, so this shows that there is a fixed cost over here. Part B is saying it has no variable cost. Again, no, total cost is made up of fixed cost and variable cost, so there is an element of variable cost involved here. Its average fixed cost increases. Average fixed cost is not being increased in this scenario. We cannot just say that by this total cost curve. Its average variable cost is constant. So yes, average variable cost is constant because this is a constant linear line that we have over here. So answer will be D. Its average variable cost is constant. Why are we considering it constant? Because like a straight line moving up, which is exactly parallel to your total cost curve, so this is your variable cost. So this is a constant variable, average variable cost. Moving on to question number 14, the table shows the average total cost of a firm over a range of output. So output is given to you, average total cost is given. What happens after 4 units are produced? So after 4 units, now when the output is 4, we see that average total cost is 5. When the output is 5, the average total cost has now increased to 7. Previously, average total cost was decreasing as a result of output being increased. So this means the firm was experiencing economies of scale. But after this point of output 4, they are starting to experience diseconomies of scale. And diseconomies of scales, so the options are given to us. The firm experiences management problems. Well, yes, management problems are part of diseconomies of scale. Part B, the firm gains the benefits of merging with another firm. No, not really, because that might have been happening on these above values, but they're specifically asking us about what's happening after 4, after the output is increased from 4 units. So that's not applicable over here. The firm pays lower interest rates to the banks. We cannot say that from this information at all. The firm receives significant discounts from bulk buying. Again, this is related to economies of scale, and this would have been true if they would have asked first for a change of any units that were mentioned over here. So like if they said 1 to 2 or 2 to 3 or after 3, but they're asking us for after 4, so we go with option A, because this is where the firm is experiencing diseconomies of scale and management problems are an indicator of diseconomies of scale. Moving on to question number 15, two car manufacturers agree to merge. Which outcome would be a disadvantage for customers? A, increased capital for research and development. This will not be a disadvantage, this is actually an advantage. So lower average cost through economies of scale, again this is an advantage. Reduced range of vehicles produced, this is definitely a disadvantage because they would want to reduce their costs and reduce the variety that they're offering. And part D was use of wider range of marketing information. No, so we stick with option C. Question number 16, an economy recorded a second month of deflation. What does this mean? So deflation actually means that when your prices are actually reducing, so price levels were falling. So when you're recording deflation constantly, so we can easily say that price levels are falling. Question number 17, what is the cause of demand pull inflation? Demand pull inflation is a result of aggregate demand being increased in the economy, and as a result the price levels increasing. So they are saying, what is the cause of demand pull inflation? A surplus of skilled labor? No, this will be affecting the supply. Higher government expenditure? Definitely, when the government is spending more in the economy, this will push the aggregate demand curve outside, as in the aggregate demand in the economy will increase, and this can be a cause of your prices to increase, which leading to a demand pull inflation. Uh, there's higher tax rates, lower net exports, they won't really apply over here, because higher tax rates will increase the prices. That is not the cause for demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation, higher tax rates may cause the prices to increase, but like this is not a cause for the demand pull inflation. Moving on to question number 18, what is the consequence of economic growth for individuals and for the economy? So economic growth for individuals would mean higher income levels, so the option with increase in average income, and the second option increase in government tax revenue. Well, yes, they both are applicable, so we stick to option B. When there's high economic growth, definitely individuals will be earning more, and the economy will also be earning more in form of the tax revenue. There is no point of increase in absolute poverty, because absolute poverty is like when people are completely poor, they don't have their basic needs being fulfilled. And looking at any other options, increase in the variety of goods and services, that can happen. However, the economy reduction in exports, not necessarily. Exports can increase also. So yeah, we stick with option B. Question number 19, the table shows the government's receipts from taxation. There are different duties and taxes mentioned over here. What is the total amount of revenue raised by indirect tax? Okay, so indirect tax is what the consumers are paying on what they're spending. The indirect duties or taxes mentioned over here are air passenger duty, so we can take this. Tax on firm's profit is considered as a direct tax. Import duty, well, import duty is again part of your indirect tax. Income tax is a direct tax. Inheritance tax is also a direct tax, and sales tax is classic example of indirect tax, because that is what you're paying on what you're spending. So 300 plus 75 plus 10, that makes it 385. So 385 is the total amount that they're receiving in form of indirect taxes. Moving on to question number 20, which supply side policy measure would help to match the skills of workers to job vacancies? Okay, so encouraging the modernization of factories. So supply side policy measure to help match the skills of workers to job vacancies. Right, so part A is saying encouraging the modernization of factories, that can actually lead to unemployment, and that will not be. Part B is saying offering retraining to unemployed workers. Yes, retraining can be linked to a supply side policy, and to match the skills of workers to the jobs that are available. So suppose you're training them for the specific skills that are required in or that are in demand currently. C is reducing taxes to provide incentives to work. Then again, reducing taxes will not really connect to the point that they're asking over here, because the main focus is on to match the skills of workers for job vacancies. So it's like, suppose if they're reducing taxes, more and more people will be willing to work, but it's not necessarily that these workers have the skills that are required by the companies or the firms at that point. So not really applicable. D, replacing government enterprises with private enterprises. No, not at all. We will select option B, because from what has been mentioned in the statement, supply side policy measure is specifically concentrating on to match the skills of workers to job vacancies. So this is what retraining will offer, because you can retrain your unemployed workers with the specific set of skills that the industry currently requires. Moving on to question number 21, how is the rate of inflation measured? Well, we use CPI or RPI to indicate that. So part A is saying by calculating a change in price of goods and services from one year to the next. Exactly, this is what CPI is calculating, the change in the basket of goods between different years. If you look at other options, by calculating the real value of all output of goods and services. No, real value is the value adjusted for inflation. C, by calculating the total number of people willing and able to work but cannot find work. Again, not necessarily, this is actually referring to the unemployment rate. D, by calculating the total value of exports. Again, that's focusing something on your balance of payment, surplus or deficit. This is a classic definition for your CPI. So consumer price index is used to calculate the inflation in any country. So this is a simple definition, by calculating the change in price of goods in one year as compared to the next. So question 22 was removed in this paper for some reason. Moving on to question number 23. Which combination of policy measures is most likely to increase the level of employment? So policy measure most likely to increase the level of employment. A decrease in general taxation and decrease the rate of interest. So if taxes are reduced, that will increase the demand in the economy, and if the rate of interest is decreased, again that will make the cost of borrowing less, leading the aggregate demand in the economy to increase. So yes, A can be an option. Let's just look at the other options too. Decrease general taxation and increase the rate of interest. Well, decrease general taxation applies, but increase in the rate of interest will not apply, because interest is your cost of borrowing, and when your interest rates are low, that will lead to aggregate demand being increased. So aggregate demand will increase as a result of lower interest rate, and when your aggregate demand increases, that will require firms to increase their production to meet the excess demand, and as a result that will create more employment opportunities. So increase in general taxation options, we are not even looking at that, because when you're increasing general taxation, so that is kind of limiting the purchasing power of people, and that is actually a contractionary policy that the government does. So it is asking to increase the level of employment. We choose option A, to decrease general taxation and decrease the rate of interest. Moving on to question number 24. Poverty in household may be defined in relative terms. When we're talking about relative terms, that means in comparison. So what indicates relative poverty? Relative poverty, A is falling below society's expected standard of living. Yes, this can be your answer. Let's look at other options. B is income level required to meet basic needs. No, this is not considered as a judge of relative poverty. Lack of access to clean water, this is, you can say this is relatable to absolute poverty. Living on less than $2 a day, no, we'll go with option A, because when we're talking about, basically we talk about two types of poverties. We have absolute poverty. Absolute poverty focuses on basic things like whether you have food to eat, whether you have clothes to wear. So the basic needs that you have, whether they are available or not with the people, that will consider them as absolutely poor. And now relative poverty is as in comparison to someone else, you're poor or rich. So suppose in general we can say like people living in Pakistan might be uh, not so poor as compared to people living in Uganda, but they might be very poor in comparison to people who are living in Switzerland or Dubai. So relative poverty is how you're comparing different standard of living between the different societies. So falling below society's expected standard of living can be the answer over here. Moving on to question number 25. What is the effect of an economy of net emigration of people aged 20 to 40? So, emigration is when your people are leaving your country, they're going out to the other country. So, what will be the effect on an economy whose young workforce is leaving? A. More mobile labor force? No. B. An aging population? Yes, this can be the case. Higher government tax revenue, rising house prices? No, not really. So we select option B, that is an aging population, because like when most of your young workforce is leaving the country, you're left with the old age people, or that's the problem of an aging population. Moving on to question number 26. The table shows the statistics for 4 countries. Which country has the lowest standard of living? Okay, so whenever we are talking about the standard of living, the very first thing that and you have been given some sort of a data, it's always smart to look at the life expectancy first of all. So when the standard of living will be high, life expectancy will be high, and when a standard of living is low, life expectancy will be low. Now there are only two values that are lowest in the given data, so there is 46 and 44, option A and D. Now second thing that I'll look at is the real GDP per head. So real GDP for the country with a lower standard of living should be lower. However, in this case, we see that the options that we have chalked out, they both have the same real GDP value. So even for country A, that is 190, and even for country D, that is 190. So now, what is the third thing that I can look to compare? Now let's look at the uh, average annual growth rate of population, because uh, when we have low standard of living, we are usually talking about an underdeveloped country, and underdeveloped countries have a high birth rate, and they also have more people living per square mile, so we can look at that too. So the average annual growth rate of population is highest for country D. So compared to country A, that is very high. So average annual growth rate, that means, in other words, in simple words, you can say the birth rate. So how many children are being born. So obviously they have a high population, and that is also justified by this value, where the population density per square kilometer, as in number of people who are living on every square kilometer, that is high. So we go with option D, because this will be having the lowest standard of living. Now going to question number 27. A country specializes in production of steel, toys and textiles. What is the disadvantage of a specialization for the country's workers? So, a specific disadvantage for the workers. Uh, Part A, they cannot afford to buy products from other countries. We cannot really say that. Part B, they could become structurally unemployed if global demand changes. Yes, this can be a possibility, because in case the demand for steel declines or demand for toys or textile declines, this labor can become unemployed because labor is a drive demand. Part C, they have to learn a variety of skills. No, they don't, because they're only focusing on producing three products. So either they become a toy maker or they become a steel worker, so they don't need to learn a variety of skills. They have too much choice, which wastes their time. They don't have too much choice. Okay, so we're simply choosing option B, that they could become structurally unemployed if global demand goes down, because they were asking us for a disadvantage of a specialization for the workers. The diagram shows, question number 28, the diagram shows China's trade with Brazil for 2 years. So year 1 is shown by the light gray and year 2 is shown by the dark gray. China's exports and China's imports. Okay, so if we look at this closely, we can see that China exports were around 0.9 and imports were somewhere around 0. Let's say 7 or 8. So exports were greater than imports, and in year 2 we can see that the exports have now almost more than doubled. However, the imports have drastically increased a lot. So previously they had more exports and compared to less imports, so they were like having a surplus, and now they're having a deficit. So what happened to China's trade balance with the Brazil between year 1 and year 2? It experienced a falling surplus. Well, can we say that they're experiencing a falling surplus? Uh, Not really, because they had a very slight surplus initially in year 1, which has gone into a day. So part B is saying it experienced a rising deficit. Uh, it moved from deficit to surplus, it moved from surplus to deficit. Now, in when we're choosing a statement that is describing something like this, we go with the option that is completely to the point with what the information is given. We're not building any assumptions over here. We'll stick to the fact that has been given to us. So what we can see is that yes, China had a surplus in exports, although it was a very small, but that was a surplus. Their exports were more than their imports, and in year 2, uh, although their exports have increased, but now they are almost half of their imports, so that means they are experiencing a deficit. So option D is more suitable over here because it moved from surplus to deficit. Moving on to question number 29. The US imposed tariffs on cars and motorcycles from Germany. What is the effect of these tariffs? So tariffs are the import duties that are imposed. So the motorcycles and cars that are coming from Germany, they are being charged a tax which will make their prices expensive. So a decrease in inflation in the US? No, not at all, because that will actually uh, lead to prices being increased, because obviously these imported German cars will have higher prices as there's tax attached to it. Part B, decrease in trade between US and Germany. Well, this is a possibility because the demand for German products will reduce. The demand for German cars and motorcycles will reduce, and that may result in a decrease in trade. Looking at other options, increase in profits of cars and motorcycle producers for Germany. Not necessarily. Why? Because obviously they're selling cars and motorcycles to many different countries, and we cannot really say that their profits will increase or decrease just by US imposing a tariff on them. And then again, increase is quite not a sensible thing over here, because increase in profits, it might decrease the profits. Part D, increase in the standard of living in the US and in Germany. Not related at all, so we stick with option B. Decrease in trade between the US and Germany as a result of imposed tariffs. Moving on to question number 30, what is an immediate effect for a country of a fall in its foreign exchange rate? Immediate effect for a country of a fall in its foreign exchange rate. Whenever the currency value falls, this will make your exports more attractive in the foreign market. So the immediate effect for a country to have a fall in its foreign exchange rate, the option should be something related to your increase in exports or your exports becoming more attractive. Looking at the option, we have a fall in the money supply, not really connected. Part B, an increase in purchasing power, cheaper imports, B, more competitive exports. So your fall in foreign exchange rate will make your exports more attractive, more competitive in the international market, because that will make your goods more cheaper. Cheaper imports is not possible because your currency is losing value, so actually your imports are becoming more expensive. B is not possible because an increase in purchasing power will not happen, because when your exchange rate is falling, your money is losing its value. You will not be able to buy the same amount of imported goods. So in other words, your purchasing power is actually being reduced. So we stick with option D, because whenever we're talking about the main advantage of fall in foreign exchange rate for a country, that is that it makes its exports more attractive. And this is also something that we talk about when we say that a country would like to reduce its trade deficit. So a fall in exchange rate can be favorable for a country because that will make its exports more attractive in the foreign market, leading its demand for it the demand for its exports to become higher. So guys, this was it for this paper, and I hope this video was helpful to you. I have tried to go over all the questions in as much detail as possible. Please do leave your comments in the section below, and if you have any request for any specific paper, do let me know. Thanks for watching. Take care and good luck for your exam.